My name is Lawrence Rosenberg, and this is the Alpha Human Podcast. Today's guest is someone who truly redefines what it means to be unstoppable. Nick Lavery is an active duty member of the United States Army Special Forces, also known as the Green Berets. In 2013, during a deployment to Afghanistan, Nick and his team faced a devastating attack that resulted in him being shot 5 times. 4 times in his right leg and once in his lower left leg. Despite suffering a shattered femur and a severed femoral artery, injuries that should have killed him, especially given that he had to wait over an hour to be airlifted out due to the raging firefight, Nick survived, although his injuries ultimately resulted in the amputation of his right leg above the knee. However, after more than 30 surgeries and a year of recovery at Walter Reed Medical Center, Nick set out to do what no one has ever done before, fight his way back to full operational status, and he did just that. Nick became the first above-the-knee amputee in Special Forces history to return to full-spectrum combat operations. And for his achievements in service to our nation, Nick has been awarded the Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Bronze Star with V for Valor. With all of that to his credit, Nick is also the founder and CEO of Team Machine, which provides unique solutions in leadership, performance, mindset, resilience, and achievement strategies for business, for life, for mindset, for the athlete, and mindset for the warrior. On top of all of this, Nick is also the author of Objective Secure, the battle-tested guide to goal achievement. Nick, welcome to the show.
Dude, that may be, Lawrence, the greatest introduction I have ever heard. You know what I'm saying? One of my mentors has a great quote. He says, never show propensity for a job you don't want. And you, my friend, may have just unintentionally earned yourself a whole different type of slot on this team. I made it to take you on the road to do just that on repeat, man. So well done. And it's a privilege, man. It's an honor. I appreciate the invitation. Looking forward to having a great discussion here.
Phenomenal. And just thank you so much for your service. You know, I got to say, I've interviewed a lot of tier 1 operators, a lot of elite warriors. And I have to say, having read your book, having watched you numerous videos, interviews, when someone actually envisions or imagines a special operator, someone from the Green Berets, a Navy SEAL, you name it, a true elite warrior. Like you're what people see in their mind. You're what people envision. You actually fit the bill. And I'm not exaggerating here. So it really is an honor to talk to you. So I'm excited to ask you some of these questions. Rather than diving into your origin story, and how you became who you are, because that's been covered in depth, particularly in a phenomenal discussion that you had, Nick, with Sean Ryan, right?
Yeah.
So instead of that, I want to focus on your philosophy, your mindset, your strategies for achieving success, because there are so many people who struggle with overcoming limiting beliefs.
Sure.
And who see certain challenges as insurmountable. And I believe you're uniquely qualified to guide us through this kind of thing, because you achieved the improbable by becoming a Green Beret, which is something very few people ever achieve. But because after losing your leg in combat, you did what no one in history has ever done, right? You returned to active combat duty. So it's, I think it's as hard as it is to become a member of the Army Special Forces, it's almost impossible to do so with one leg, yet you did it. Really, how does someone conquer that kind of mountain? How do you break through those types of improbable barriers, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally? That's what I want to delve in today. And I think there's no better way to do this than to dive into your book, Objective Secure, because I think that really blueprints the way. How does that sound?
Let's do it, man. Excited.
Okay. So my first question is, and I'm going to dive right in, right? In the book, there's a chapter called I Will Never Quit. And you discuss the broader meaning. In that chapter, you discuss the broader meaning of time, emphasizing how it's more precious than we often realize.
Mm.
And you describe how after being hit in the leg by a 7.62 millimeter round during a firefight, a few of them, and the severing of your femoral artery, um, it essentially left you with minutes to live.
Mm.
And in that brief window, your focus and training took over, and it turned into like a relentless battle for survival, not just for yourself, but also for your teammates.
Right.
And the experience gave you a profound appreciation for life and a deep
Mm.
understanding of the value of every single minute, where, as you say, minutes can hold the weight of days.
Mm.
For those not facing life or death situations, coming to a true understanding of the value of time can be really elusive. How do you convey the urgency and significance of this realization to others? Like, how do you help them grasp that every moment counts so that they can make this paradigm shift, even when the stakes aren't as high as what you had to go through?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And I can tell you, when you're faced with what is seemingly an insurmountable task, and oftentimes I think this is the case with many where they're on the back end of a traumatic event, or they've hit this kind of rock bottom place in their life by virtue of whatever the situation may be. I would argue that for many, it does require going through something like that to gain this next level degree of perspective. And really, that's kind of what we're talking about here is perspective. And there's a significant difference between perception and perspective. And actually, when it comes to a lot of high performers within different industries, one's ability to wield perspective is an incredible tool. It's an incredible power. Those are qualities that we look for during selection and assessment, certainly within the interagency type communities. Like, that is one of the identifying character traits that assessors are looking at. Does this person have that, and or do they have a foundation in which that can be built upon? And this exists within all sectors, because at the end of the day, you're talking about the human dynamic. And this is why principles like leadership are just so essential, no matter what you do: corporate, universities, students, athletes, business professionals, law enforcement, military. We operate in and around and through human beings. And one's ability to have that tool of perspective is going to enable you to influence, inspire, and effectively enable other people to go win, no matter what it is you're trying to do. So I think framing it in that sense is important, because at the end of the day, I can't put somebody through the scenario that I went through. That is really what was the major catalyst for me to be able to gain that perspective. I had a foundation there, and I trained on it, and it's part of being a Green Beret. But that was certainly, it took things into another level when it comes to the value of time and just how precious life is. And when you're laying there dying, you have that snap through time. Man, like, did I maximize my time I had here? Did I say the things to my loved ones that I wish I had said? Or yet all these kind of regrets may start to come up, and it all happens really, really fast. But I experienced that. So I have tasked myself, really, Lawrence, with what I would say is a really hard mission, which is the only kinds of missions that I typically am interested in. I want to go big, and it's this exact point. How do I take that experience that I've been through, that I've leveraged to gain that perspective, and then start to cram that into other people's minds? And I think that what I've seen over time is the power of storytelling, the effectiveness of effective communication, to be able to take these events, summarize it and translate it, and then explain it and communicate it in a way in which people can begin to put themselves in those situations. Of course, they'll never be able to experience it the way I did, but that's part of the mission. And that's part of the value of effective communication and storytelling, and why it is such an essential tool that we use as human beings, going back to since the beginning of human beings. We use storytelling for a lot of different reasons. Mm-hmm. We use it for entertainment, even professional or any type of athletics is a sense of storytelling. It's just happening in front of your face live. So we use it for entertainment. We use it to pass the time. But I would say more importantly, we use it to learn from, i.e. another version of history. This is why history as a topic is so valuable, is because we can extract wisdom from previous events to learn from, and then wield that knowledge moving forward. that is a part of how I've continued to kind of craft my skill as a service provider, which is so outside my kind of natural comfort zone of being more of a quiet professional, just go do the work. Your actions will speak for itself. You know, what I do now is in a lot of ways completely opposite of that, which creates a bit of cognitive dissonance with me. And it's a struggle. It's a thing I continue to go through, but that has been proven to work. And I've seen that happen when I'm with an audience and with a group, regardless of the size and scale. You start to see those little light bulbs going off. Almost you can visually see it above people's heads, kind of their eyes light up like, oh my gosh, man, this is a thing. And I'm starting to see it. And then I think that develops a sense of urgency within people where it's, you know what, I have been getting a little lackadaisical. I have been kind of going through the motions and kind of floating through day by day. And, you know, this game that we're on, this ride, this gift known as life is going to come to an end. And that is an incredible superpower. And I think once you can see it that way, that is the spark that then creates a little bit of drive, a little bit of incentive to people to want to get after it and stop moving in their direction.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because the way you tell the story in your book, it's really unique. The way you lay everything out, interspersing strategies, mindset, approach, ideas, along with bits and pieces of your story, as well as how others tell your story. So in telling that story, I can tell you from reading the book, it does start to resonate. And so,
thank you.
I mean, that's a really interesting concept with respect to how do you transfer an experience that most are never going to have, which is coming to the brink of death and then appreciating what they have left. You mentioned going big on your missions. That's the types of missions you like to take on. And you've also mentioned that time often becomes our go-to justification for not accomplishing something big. People cite reasons like, and this is your words, by the way, people cite reasons like laziness due to a lack of passion, improper planning, workaholic syndrome. I personally believe that laziness driven by a lack of passion is probably the biggest obstacle, because I think if you have passion, you'll find a way. But for many, though, the struggle actually lies in discovering their passion, discovering their purpose, discovering their mission. So how does someone, in your opinion, go about finding their purpose and passion? How do they go about finding their mission?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in fact, I think that that's where many miss a very important, arguably the first step in this process is, what is it that you're trying to do? Like, what is the goal? And many simply don't have that. And without identifying that, you know, the expression is, you know, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So like, you may be making progress towards something, or you could just be on a treadmill, meaning you're moving, but you're not going anywhere, which are two entirely different things.
Right.
But have you staked a claim in the ground? Have you planted a flag in the future as a beacon to begin moving towards? If the answer to that is no, which is kind of getting to your question, Lawrence, then I think that that's really step one. And the unfortunate reality is that answer to that question may not come immediately, you know? And of course, what's the question? I would say that there's probably three worth exploring. One, what do I want to do? Two, perhaps more powerful than that, is who do I want to become? And then lastly, which is essential, I think rounds it out, is why do I want to do this? What is my reasoning behind this? None of this has any value at all if you do not have a high degree of self-honesty and self-awareness, because it's so easy for us to bullshit ourselves to protect our own emotional well-being. These fabrications that we come up with, these lies, these facades that we create and are so easily convinced by our own nonsense because it makes us feel better about ourselves. No, I'm not lazy. I'm just blank. No, it's not that I lack drive. It's just, it's not the right time. I'm busy. I don't have the right circumstances. I have shit genetics. Like, this will just keep going and going and going and going and going. And our brain is literally equipped to provide us with these reasons as to why, etc.
Mm.
So it's very easy to nod our heads at, like you and I are doing right now. But to put this into practice can be really difficult.
Yeah.
You have to take a really hard, candid look in the mirror, pop the hood and look and say, what am I really operating with here? And like, what am I trying to do? So let's assume that you've accepted that. I have a couple recommendations that actually I do talk about in the book a little bit on how to go about doing it. I've actually added a third, which is not an objective secure. I don't think I've actually shared this publicly. I'll do it right now, I think for the first time.
Awesome.
The first, which is in the book, is listen to your heart, listen to your soul, kind of go into a dark room or a meditated state, or go for a walk on the beach, or, just sit with yourself and have that internal dialogue as I just described it. What do I want to do? Who do I want to be? And why do I want to do and be that? And let that be spoken forward, and then shut the hell up and listen and wait for that response to come in. And usually it shows up more in the form of a whisper than it does blasting you through the mirror and punching you in the face. You really have to listen. That is my preferred course of action. And there's a reason as to why. And it's because my second recommended course of action is to pay attention and follow your actual talent. Follow your talents, the thing or things that you do best with the least amount of effort. Everybody, according to that definition of talent, has at least one talent. Yes. Because it's subjective to you. What is the thing or the couple things that you do the best with the least amount of effort? That at least zeroes you in into a certain craft or area or general means of doing something, of an area of life to guide you towards. And statistically speaking, it increases your likelihood of success, because as we know, talent and skill are two entirely different things, right? Skill is only earned through thousands of hours of hammering on a particular craft. But if you can lay a talent and skill on top of each other, the likelihood of success will skyrocket. Now, I would argue that hard work beats talent all day long, but when talent works hard, you are on another level of capability. So that at least gives people kind of a more tactical means of reframing the question. What do I do best with the least amount of effort? This, and this. And cool. Now I've got a direction to start moving towards and developing myself further within those areas. Those two recommendations are both an objective secure.
Yes.
The third one that I've kind of added a little bit, and I haven't put it on paper, at least not at this point, but it's something I talk about with clients, is to weaponize curiosity. And what are you just interested in? You may not have any kind of talent in it. Your soul may not be telling you that this is why you were put on this planet, but you just have an interest in it. And then you just go and try it and see, like, what's this all about? I'm kind of just curious to find out, what is this thing? And with me, I really did kind of go that route when I fell in love with being a special operator and with being a soldier. My soul really wasn't talking to me. I had some talent in the sense that I was physically capable and I had like a degree of aggressiveness and stuff, but that wasn't why I decided to become a soldier. Mine was based mostly off of, I'm really angry about 9/11. And I think that this is a way, I'm curious to see, I think this is a way that I would like to try to see if that is a direction I want to go in. So that was more so about me and my journey was through that lens. So I've since kind of added that as an additional option, call it COA 3. So COA 1 is internal dialogue, discuss with yourself, let your soul or your heart talk back to you. COA 2 is identify your talents and move in those directions. And then COA 3 would be weaponized curiosity.
So that's interesting, because in reading your book, I thought about I really thought about the reflection piece. Made so much sense. The talent piece is if you're lucky enough to have a talent that will take you far, then that's amazing. You might have a talent that doesn't take you too far, but that you're really good at it. So great for the mission. I love this idea about curiosity, because, man, you could be curious about so many things. You could be interested in so many rabbit holes you could dive into. And like you said, try one. What's the worst that can happen? You fail. But so here's something that you talk about in the book as well. Let's say you sign on to a mission that defies talent or logic, right? You're more in the zone of my heart's leading me here, my curiosity is leading me there. And it excites you, right? The curiosity is the unknown. The heart is you've got passion. And let's say, okay, as your book talks about, you put together the design, the plan, right? You do the research, you figure out the approach. You talk about how like one of the biggest enemies might be something none of us expect when we're chasing this kind of dream. And you point this out numerous times. You talk about it as maybe the biggest dream killer could be monotony. Can you describe this issue? Because most people are going to think like, who is going to get bored chasing a dream, right? Or a curiosity? How are you going to get bored doing that?
I would say that odds are you will at some point. The grind is going to set in, the monotony is going to set in, and it becomes a war of attrition. It becomes a game of stamina, really endurance. Like how long can you endure the discomfort and struggle, but the frequency and consistency and the monotonous grind of the things that you're doing that you don't necessarily feel like doing, or you don't even like doing, but you know with a high degree of certainty and confidence that it's going to work, and you have to stick to it and continue to pound the pavement. You know, I use like nutrition as a great example, although this doesn't solely exist in the realm of fitness and health and physical performance, but it's a great analogy because it paints the picture brilliantly. It's like if you want to look a certain way, be able to do things physically, live a long, healthy life, whatever your physical goals may be, without question, what you are putting into your body is going to be part of that discussion for sure. Possibly and probably warranted the first thing that's discussed prior to even getting into training and like recovery and sleep hygiene. There's all these other facets, but we just focus on what are you fueling your body with and how and what frequency. You know, odds are that is going to progress into something that is incredibly meticulous and boring, and you're eating the same like 9 foods every single day, and that's just it's rinse and repeat. And you just at the beginning of that, it's bland. You know, food is usually a sense of pleasure for many people. We gather socially around food. It's part of our culture. It's part of our ideology in a lot of ways. It's part of us as human beings. So you're going completely against the grain, and you're saying, no, I'm putting this in my body right now because it works. I don't care about the taste. That makes no difference. I don't even see a means of pleasure at this point anymore. It's just simply fuel. And you take what works, but it's the same small batch of things that work, and you do it again and again and again and again. And many people will launch themselves on this diet or nutrition plan, and they go way too extreme, way too early, and that monotony just crushes them within a week or two. The first couple of days, it's easy. You fire it up, you're excited, you're crystal clear, the clarity of the vision's there. You can picture yourself with a 6-pack or with big arms or whatever the goal is. But that fades when the grind sets in and the monotony sets in. The vision becomes less clear. It becomes more fuzzy, it's blurrier. It's more difficult to see because the monotony is just crushing you. And the idea of choking down yet another bland chicken breast is making you nauseous. Those that can stick through that and make it through that grind, there's that kind of window in between. I'm really excited. I'm seeing immediate effects because this is new. And then you hit that grind phase where the effects are not coming nearly as noticeable. In fact, they might not be noticeable at all. So you're not getting that immediate feedback as you did for the first couple weeks or month. Less immediate returns, and the monotony is starting to set in. Now, right now at that point, that's when the game is really being played. Now we're going to decide who actually really wants this. You got those like newbie gains that happen quick. Your excitement was high, motivation was high because it was new. That eventually falls off. And now you've entered into the realm of everybody else. Now we're really going to see how bad you want this. And the answer to the question is, are you willing to stick with the process, trust that process, stay in the trenches, stay in the grind, do the boring, monotonous, unsexy work that has proven to work in the face of without immediate feedback that it is working? And can you still stick with it and stay and continue on that course?
So, so does that mean, and by the way, no one ever really explains this up front. When you go for a big goal or for a big dream, you're so hyped up, so overtaken by the thought of getting to the top of the mountain. No one ever says to you, hold on a second, get ready for this. Here's the thing that derails most people. It's the grind. It's it's the boredom. It's the humdrum daily hamster wheel that you have to go through again and again and again. So is so how do you, because you just said, hey, now we're gonna find out who really wants it. So is that the key to getting through the grind? Is it that you better pick a goal or a mission, as you say, a big mission? You better pick something worth suffering through that grind? Is that how you get over the grind, by picking something exciting enough that'll keep you going in those tough times? Or do you have, other advice for, hey, here's how you're going to get over this. Here's how you're going to get through the other end of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that having a high degree of passion is necessarily an ironclad requirement.
Okay.
I would say staunchly that it is going to make a significant difference, because it is the love of the game and a love of the end state and that vision and the passion for the process that is what will help most significantly get back up after getting knocked down and stay in the grind and stay disciplined to do the things that you need to do when you don't want to do them, is because you love the game you're playing and you love what you're working towards. I don't think it's a requirement, but I would say that it goes a long way. I mean, there are certainly plenty of successful versus, a lot of different ways to describe that, entrepreneurs and business people and even, athletes that simply saw an opportunity. They may not even have really loved the game they're playing, or they may not love the tech industry, but they're like, there's a massive opportunity here, and I'm going to commit myself to it in order to get that win at the end of the day. That can work. I'd say, regardless of whether or not the passion is there, which again, I'm a huge fan of, and I do promote that and I do recommend that, because I also think that if you define success as I do, or similarly as I do, happiness is part of that equation, at least at some point, ideally most of the time. And if you make all the money in the world and you get all the status in the world, but if you're miserable the entire time, then what's the point? What are we doing? Right. That's me. That's my personal opinion. So gotcha. I think with passion, it does add that layer of fulfillment that you're getting consistently, which not only helps you stay in the game, but also this is the game of life that we have, as we talked about. It's going to end, and why not enjoy the ride at least a little bit, or at least ideally most of the time, regardless of whether or not you have the passion. At the end of the day, Lawrence, in my opinion, discipline is the foundation of this entire mentality. That is the springboard that everything else is jumped off. That's what the house is built on top of. It's the willingness to do the work when you don't feel like it. And the irony of this, man, is I'm so often thanked and kind of labeled as a source of motivation for people, which is great. And it's an honor, and I'm incredibly humbled when I receive that kind of compliment. I'm not anti-motivation. My problem with motivation is it's fleeting. I mean, it comes and it goes. And if you have it, it's great, right? Your ROI goes up, your intensity has gone up, your effort is likely higher. You're gaining more return on the investment because you are motivated to do the task at that time. All motivation is an increase in desire to do something. That is what motivation is. And if we have it, it's fantastic. The problem I have with it is, one, it comes and it goes. And two, if you don't have it in that moment, you still have to get the work done. Now we're talking about discipline. If you only execute on the things that need to get done when you are motivated to do it, you're going to lose. All right. You will lose. Now, you may win a battle or two here and there, but you're going to lose the war. And you're going to lose the war to the person or the organization that is willing to do what needs to be done, particularly when they don't feel like doing it. That is who wins with consistency. So whether or not you have the passion or not, from the beginning. Maybe it develops over time because you're just curious and you try it, you see opportunity. Ooh, that's got me kind of excited. And at some point you fall in love with an aspect of what you're doing. With or without that, discipline is a non-negotiable. It is not going away. It is a requirement for success, however you define that word, and whatever it is you're moving towards. We have to be able to execute when we don't want to.
Powerful. So you just mentioned something that I want to dive into. You talked about happiness. So I'm going to quote you directly from the book here. There were times when I would be making insane progress, right? So this is you, Nick, talking. You said my numbers in the gym were on track. They were improving. I was getting good grades in grad school. Things with my family were good. According to the numbers, I was on a solid trajectory. But when I would notice the last section of that day's entry in your log, where you talked about how you were feeling, you would notice a trend of terms like I'm frustrated, I'm tired, I'm unmotivated. How can that be? I'm crushing life right now. You know, what I determined to be the glitch, you say, was my constant, and I do mean constant, focus on goals. It was the accomplishment of the objective, the accomplishment of the mission that would ultimately bring me happiness, but there's a problem with that. I spoke on satisfaction, how it doesn't exist for the greats, how as soon as we reach objective secure, we're looking toward the next ridgeline. For those of us who operate in this fashion, and for those who look to dial in and get serious and begin making substantial progress, we must be aware of a potential threat, that being our entire life going by. And although we may have a list of accomplishments or a bunch of stuff, we failed to enjoy the ride. So, Nick, those are your words. I want to ask you, as many times as I hear and as everyone hears, it's about the journey, not the destination. It resonates. At least it resonates for me when I hear that.
Yeah.
But it's a massive challenge to figure out how to step out of the striving, how to step out of the momentum, how to step out of the moment when we're in it, and learn how to enjoy that journey just as much as the prize.
Yeah.
Because as you say, this enjoyment is not only critical to happiness, but it's also an indicator, you say, of whether we're even on the right path. Right? So, I mean, when you take all of that into account, how does one actually do that? How do you pull yourself out of the moment, out of the grind, and learn to love the journey? How does one actually do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. You actually set up the first thought to this discussion here brilliantly with the evolution of the way in which I was kind of documenting and tracking things. And, you know, my training logs, which I have ones that go back like 20 plus years at this point,
Wow.
For a long time was focused on, you know, sets, reps, grams of protein. It was those like hard metrics as it pertains to physical performance. And at a certain point, I began adding more emotional elements to my log. And this was not intended to be a means of therapy or like to create like a therapeutic solution to a potential problem. Mm-hmm. It was based on human performance. I was trying to maximize every single possible element of my being to perform better. And I started to notice, as you said, where I would look back on my log, which is one of the major points of having one, is to identify where you were at and do some analysis on where you were, where you are, what's going wrong, what's going well in between then and now. And I started looking at those metrics, oftentimes even more so than, you know, how many reps on the flat bench press did I get 7 weeks ago? It was, what's the trend in my emotional state? Because that's correlated directly to physical performance. Mm-hmm. So that really did evolve as it is today now into two separate products. I have my training log, which again, set reps, PRs, misses, and then I've got my journal, which is purely based on my emotion and my psychology. That is an incredible tool. Like the question was like, how do you go about doing that? And I come back to brutal self-honesty and brutal self-awareness Without those two things, none of the rest of this stuff is likely going to matter much at all. You have to be able to tell yourself the truth. And as long as you do that in this manner, whether you're tracking reps on a back squat or how you're feeling in this particular day or during this week, if you do that accurately and authentically, now you've got data that you can actually use. And when you notice, as I have at times, where my metrics are looking great, but so my log looks great, my journal looks like shit. It's like, okay, what's the problem here? Like I should, which is a very dangerous word to use, I should be much happier. I should be feeling much more fulfillment. I should not be as lethargic or frustrated or angry as I clearly have been over this last period of time. What's the glitch? And, that takes quite a bit of soul searching, internal dialogue. But here's where I think is an amazing opportunity to leverage your team. Who do you have around you that you trusted advisors, those that are similarly like-minded, meaning that they're ambitious and they're going after something, not necessarily the same exact thing as you, going after something, hungry individuals who can show you compassion and who care about you and vice versa. This could be your internal family. It could be spouse, your kids, family members. It could be friends. It could be colleagues at work. You could be part of an entirely different community, like, jiu-jitsu, like that's a little tribe that you have. Here's a chance to leverage them and say, hey, like, look, I'm looking at these two things right now, right? Like every metric over here looks great, but like, I'm not feeling all that well. I'm having a difficult time figuring out where the glitch is. Like, what are you guys seeing? What am I missing? Because what a solid team can bring is objectivity, because they don't have, while they care about you, they love you, they don't have the same emotional state that you have. So they can look at your scenario with much more logic, because emotion is much lower. As we know, emotion and logic are antagonistic of each other. As emotion goes up, logic goes down, and vice versa. So you can leverage your community, you can leverage your team to help you with that analysis. This is literally, Lawrence, one of the major reasons why me and my team created The Forge, which is our virtual coaching and community platform. It's to give people a tribe to leverage. And we do this, what I'm telling you right now, literally every day. So to answer the question a little more concisely, do you have a means of tracking and paying attention to what it is you're doing, how you're doing it, how you're feeling doing it, i.e. a log / a journal? Are you doing it honestly and with a degree of self-awareness? Because if you're going to lie to yourself, this is a complete and total waste of time.
Right.
When you do your analysis on yourself, how far can you get before you need to leverage some others to bring in some support assets to help you with that analysis? And again, I would say that the way I define success, my definition of success, or my ingredients that go into success, is accomplishment, happiness, and integrity. You add those three things together, to me, that equals success, meaning it's something that's earned through a shitload of effort in really hard times. It's an achievement that you did. An achievement. Generally, I'm feeling happy about doing it along the way. We're all going to have bad days and frustrations. Yeah. This isn't saying that it's a constant, but it's there, and it's there most of the time. And then integrity, because at the end of the day, if you win and you're a complete and total scumbag and you're stepping on the heads of people around you to get to the top of the mountain, then who gives a shit?
Absolutely. I got to tell you, I've read so many self-help books, and I mean, yeah, I've talked to so many people. When you actually get down to the nitty-gritty and you look for those, again, just even in the question I asked you, which was, right, like, how do you, everyone talks about, you gotta love the journey. But no one ever has real practical advice for figuring that out. I think you're the only one that has ever, and you talk about it in the book, obviously. But this idea of journaling, and not just talking about what you're doing, the actual, the X's and the O's, but you're also talking about your feelings in that journal. What a way to actually pull yourself out of the momentum and start to to reflect and wake up to the fact that, hey, why am I not enjoying this? So again, that's such a great practical tool. So awesome. Okay. Another question for you on, we talked about how monotony can derail you. You also talk about something that a lot of people don't factor into the equation when going after the big mission, which is what you call the cost of ambition.
Ooh,
So can you describe the price that has to be paid by those who set out to accomplish a truly worthwhile mission?
yeah.
Right? Most of us don't take time to assess the cost before embarking on that journey. We just dive right in.
And man, I'm glad you bring this up. This is something that I rarely get a chance to speak on in a public forum. And I think it may be, it's tough to say my favorite part of the book, but this is certainly up there because it's so powerful. And, many people, once they're exposed to it or we discuss it, it's like, oh man, yeah, that's definitely a thing. And this kind of wasn't thinking about it until you mentioned it now, but in reflection, like, yep, that's a sneaky problem. I think there are many costs of ambition, and I think many of them can be somewhat forecasted. These are the early mornings, the late nights, right? Like the grind, the hard work, the sweat, the discomfort, eating the same thing. Like you can forecast some of that stuff, at least to a degree. Many are completely and totally ignorant. They just dive full in and it's like, oh my gosh, this totally sucks. And it's like, yeah, well, I maybe could have anticipated some of these discomforts that you're feeling. The one that tends to sneak up on people, as it has with me, and sometimes it continuously does now, is as it pertains to us socially and our social lives. And you don't need to be married. You don't need to have kids for this to apply to you. It could be whatever social dynamics you have with your parents. It could be with your friends, your best buddies, cousins, whoever you're close with. A lot of my following and a lot of our clients, it's an older demographic. Many of them have families, spouses, and children. And here's where the cost of ambition can sneak up on you. It can absolutely crush you. And it's a really powerful word is part of that. And it's the word resentment. And resentment can come into play a couple different ways, more than a couple different ways, but a couple that I tend to highlight. And it can just crush you. It can crush either your dream, or it can crush the relationship, or worst case, it crushes both. Wow. And now you're really sitting there going, man, what did I just do? And here's why it's so dangerous and so slippery. We've got people in our lives that we care about and care for us. I'm not talking about the random internet troll that's like, talking shit. Like no one cares about that. I'm talking about the people in your life that you care about. I'll use my wife as an example, or just someone's spouse. You set yourself on this mission and you go into it with at least one eye open, maybe both, but it's going to be hard. And you set yourself on this trajectory and you're getting after it. And you're making all these sacrifices and you're having to change the way you live and your lifestyle, and the dichotomy between pursuing your ambition and keeping your home life stable and perhaps your 9-to-5 job. That's a very typical triad of an individual. I've got what I use to survive, my job. I've got my family, which is likely number one in my life. And then I've got this passion project. That's a very common scenario for many people out there that are in the grind, trying to make something of themselves or trying to pursue something, a holy shit, big, audacious goal, or a bag, as we call it. It's a very common scenario. And you begin doing it and you're making progress and you're suffering through things and you're doing all these things. And initially, your teammate in life, your spouse in this example, is on board. Outstanding, good for you. Let me know how I can help you. Let me know how I can support you. It's all positive. And then as the monotony sets in, and we talked about earlier, it becomes that grind. All of a sudden, maybe that isn't so supportive from that individual because they're missing out on you. You're not spending as much time with them as you were. You're not focused on them as much as you were because now some of your bandwidth is going someplace else. And what initially was rah, rah, let's go. Now some resentment starts to set in from that person towards you. They are resenting you because of your lack of attention to them. Or similarly, they see what you're doing, yet they're not in a place in their life where they want to make a significant change. They've got a vision of something that they want to go after. They're still doing the same thing that they were doing. You're making these massive adjustments. They're seeing the progress in you. And even though they love you, they're like, I'm kind of starting to resent you a bit because I'm seeing the body mass is falling off. You're starting to tightening up a little bit. You've got this ambition about you, this excitement. I'm seeing you created your own business. I didn't even know that you knew how to do that. Like, what the hell is going on? All of a sudden starts to shift because now they're looking inwardly. You're a representation of what they could be, but they're not. And that resentment starts to come towards you. That you can see how that can start to throw a bit of friction into that social dynamic. The other way that that can happen as well, if you reverse the direction of that road, us to them, we're making the sacrifices. We're putting in the effort. We're living by this consistency. I'm being disciplined. I'm doing all these really hard things. But you, this is me talking to my spouse in this example, you're not changing anything. Like, how could you be witnessing me doing all this and it's working, and yet you're remaining static? How can you be so unmotivated to do something? I am. Why aren't you? So now you've seen how that entirely, that resentment road has flipped, where now we are resenting them because they haven't decided to make a change towards something.
Right.
That's a very dangerous, slippery slope. And it's that type of cost of ambition, the social cost of ambition, that usually sneaks up on people. And it's understandable because, you know, you get hyper focused on this thing. I want to play football on Sundays, or I want to become a Green Beret, or I want to start my own Fortune 500 business, like whatever you want to do. And that becomes the target. And all of a sudden this relationship in your life starts to crumble a little bit, starts to deteriorate a little bit. And at least some of that has to do with the resentment that can build up. And you know, it can crush you. So I do talk in the book, I'll pause here, but I do talk in the book about ways to, you know, potentially mitigate that a bit.
Yeah.
But that is one that tends to sneak up on people and can be absolutely devastating.
Absolutely. And yeah, in the book, you do give some ideas, some advice, some remedies for that. But yeah, that is a powerful one that, again, it just, people don't take this into account, but it is so real. So real. It's either going to come at you or you're going to feel it one way or another. Most people, again, with the big goals, it's going to be one or the other. Your loved one.
And this is a great scenario. Sorry, Lawrence, I didn't mean to step on you there, man, but it's a great example of an expression I use quite often, which is choose your hard. Choose your hard. Hard, I got an accent. H-A-R-D, right? I'm from Boston, as you know. So hard is another word for difficult. We'll go with that. Choose the hard you want to choose. At the end of the day, it's going to be hard. And let's use this example right here. Asking your spouse to sit down to have a difficult conversation about how you're going to be changing the way you live and the dynamic and dichotomy in the home. That's a hard conversation to walk into. That's going to be hard. Yeah. The other hard, which is almost inevitable, is when you just ignore it and then this happens and now you're dealing with the whole different kind of hard. Yeah. If you go the proactive route, you are at least choosing your hard. Now, the second difficult thing will likely still come to some degree, but it's basically, are you going to be proactive or reactive? And the more proactive you can be, the more aggressive you can be to get ahead of things, almost certainly without question is at a minimum going to mitigate the challenge and disruption and friction. If that were to come back up again, at least you've already started to make some momentum in that direction.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Okay. So we've talked about cost of ambition, talked about monotony, the grind. Here's another curveball. And again, I love that this book is filled with, these are the things that can get in your way so that you know them up front. And here's the strategies for dealing with them, right? That's what I love about this book. And this is one that people wouldn't think is necessarily a real concern or a real issue. And in fact, I've never heard anyone actually nail it for what it really is. Meaning, okay, so here it is. The fear of success. Like, here's a quote from you. Fear of death, fear of failure, fear of embarrassment. These are common fears and to be expected. There is, however, another fear, one that can easily be overlooked, a sneaky son of a bitch that lurks within our subconscious, waiting to come out of the shadows, our fear of success. How can this be fear? After all, we're striving for it. We're grinding for it. We're putting it all on the line to obtain it. Those are your words, by the way. And so, like, you articulate the reality of this fear because That's the thing. I've heard self-help gurus just talk about it, but never explain it. Psychologists bring it up, but it sounds like psychobabble. So like you articulate the reality of this fear in a way that resonates more deeply than any description I've ever heard of what fear of success really means. And that's because you experienced it. So can you describe how it's possible for the person that's pushing themselves to the limit to achieve something, how they can actually end up fearing accomplishing what they always wanted?
Yeah, it is. I do stand by what I said. It is a sneaky SOB that can all of a sudden, I mean, just paralyze you. And I had that moment as well. I'll tell you how I leveraged it. And then because then I challenge people to do the same. And it's something we've already talked about, which is really having a team around you, because this is another way in which they can provide tremendous value. I was pursuing getting back to the teams like an absolute maniac, as you've read, in the book, Lawrence, living my life in a way that would be reasonably described as complete and total insanity. And, I had an epiphany at some point pretty late in the journey that I was going back to a team, and I really hadn't thought about it much in that sense. And I did feel horrible about myself that I had gone that long, about a year and a half since I was wounded, and I was making my way back, and I had momentum and things were going great. And then boom, it hit me like, you're going back to a team. And that's when that what if question came in. Like, what if you make it back and you can't handle it? What if you make it back and you're a liability? And it almost paralyzed me in fear. What if you win and then you can't do it? So really, like, the fear of success, which is a very powerful thing. Again, we're talking ultimately about a fear of failure, but it's a compounded fear of failure. If I fail now in this journey on this task, there's a fear of that. Likely it's more emotional fear. It's not fear of me being injured. It's fear of embarrassment. It's a fear of shame. It's a fear of doubt from others. It's a fear of how I will be viewed by those around me. That's usually where the fear comes from with any particular failure. Fear of success is just, I'm going to get all these wins along the way, and it's going to make that failure just like that much worse at the end of the day. And I'm going to look back at not only failing the people around me, but I'm going to look back from now to then, and everything that I've done will all be for nothing. That is what becomes the paralyzing fear of success. What I chose to do was rely on my boys. I relied on my teammates. I mean, literally that next day I went into work and I was like, hey guys, I need 5 minutes. And they're like, what's up? And I outlined what had happened. I was like, dude, I woke up in the middle of the night, 2:00 in the morning. I thought I was going to die because it hit me while I was asleep, but I was coming back to you guys and I hadn't really thought about it. And I feel horrible. So first off, I apologize. And second, like, have you guys even thought about this? Do you guys even really want me back here? I mean, these were guys that were physically around me every single day, training together. We're doing all this stuff together. We're even talking about me getting back to the team, but I hadn't thought about it that way and had that really hard conversation. Like, do you guys even want this? Because if you don't, then I will stop what I'm doing right now and go in another direction. And they were like, listen, dude, we've talked about this like many times. We don't know if this is going to work, but we want to be the ones to figure it out. We know that you are out of your mind obsessed with trying to do this. Clearly, it was extremely emotional for me, which by definition makes it incredibly difficult and flat out unlikely for me to have an objective perspective of what I was trying to do, because it was such an emotional thing for me. I was so in love and do it. These guys could maintain an objective perspective. And I knew that about them. They had my trust because I know this business and I know that these standards don't move. And you are either an asset or you're not. And if you are not, you are not in that world, period. I knew that. So I could say, okay, here's what I can do. I can leverage these guys to have that objective opinion of this. I can stay hyper-focused and at times out of my mind on doing this because I know that they will not allow me to remain in this realm if I have no place being there. So that may seem unique that others can't leverage that because they don't have a special forces ODA to rely on. But again, if you don't have some sort of tribe, if you don't have some sort of team, then I strongly advise going and finding one. Get proactive and go find one so you can leverage them in the same exact manner. Fear of success is, in my opinion, a compounding effect of fear of failure. And if you can eventually extract the value of failure, which I also talk about in the book,
Yes.
the fact that most of the wisdom we have is by virtue of getting things wrong. Most of the knowledge that's in our brains, literally in this moment, comes by virtue of us or somebody getting something wrong, learning what not to do, and then try again to eventually find the thing that does work. Like if I asked you right now, Lawrence, how did you learn how to walk? Your answer is going to be, I fell down a whole shitload of times. That is literally how it happened. That happened with me twice. So getting it wrong can be a great thing. And the idea is to get it wrong enough in training and in building and in climbing that when you get to those moments where failure is truly not an option, you've gotten it wrong enough so that in that moment you win. So again, just to put things in perspective with the value of getting it wrong, if we can see the value in getting things wrong, then arguably the compounding effect that happens on the back end of fear of success can only bring just that much more value to you. Does that make sense?
A ton of sense. A ton of sense. Like I said, I've never heard anyone nail it before. This thing called fear of success. You nailed it, and it is extremely real, because it ultimately turns into, as you say, fear of failure, but also in many cases, like yours, it's fear of letting others down.
Right.
So that's powerful. One last question for you. You talk about crossroad situations. Everyone who's going for the big goal is going to come to a decision point where they can just take one of two roads, which is quit or keep going. And one of the things you mentioned about this, there's a lot to talk about on this topic, but just a quick one here is you talk about how language, the importance of language in overcoming these fork in the road scenarios, how important that is, noting how the mind and the body are more intimately connected than most recognize.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on how language and learning how to use language can play a role in pushing beyond our perceived limits and in overcoming those crossroad situations?
Yeah, and it's again, you're right. This could be an awesome hour-long discussion just in itself. You know, what we tell ourselves, and then oftentimes what we express externally, we can very easily begin to believe that, even if it's just a run-of-the-mill kind of commonly used expression, like it is what it is, right? Like that kind of expression, when used, particularly with repetition, we begin to believe that to be true. You're literally creating a self-imposed ceiling on what you're capable of, or why you can or cannot do something. You know, one of the classic expressions I use, and you know, at times this can annoy people. I know that, admittedly, where it's, you know, I didn't have time, and people say that countless times every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And while I can understand the spirit of that expression, I also think it's incredibly powerful if you have the honesty and the ownership to tighten that language up a little bit, be a little bit more precise, to say, this wasn't enough of a priority for me. Because at the end of the day, you had the time. We all have the same time every given day. It doesn't, you don't have to go find it. Like, oh, if only I could find the time. Like, you don't need to find shit. It's handed to you. You woke up today. There you go. Here's your 24, assuming you survive for another full day. Here it is. You don't need to go find anything, right? And you also had it. To say I didn't have it is also inaccurate, right? You had it. You chose to do something else. Now, I'm not insensitive to the fact that people have responsibilities. I have the same thing. I'm a husband. I've got 2 young boys. I've got 2 professions. I got my training. I got like this. I'm the same as anybody else. I got it. Like, time is limited, as we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you have it. You had it. You prioritized it a different way. When I am working with people or communicating with just about anybody, and they start to use language like that, I know with a high degree of confidence, I'm dealing with a different kind of person. I'm dealing with a person that holds themselves accountable. They pay attention to what they say, words mean things. They've gone through this journey that you and I are discussing literally right now, and they've elevated to another level of ownership and of reality and of truth. That is a special individual. They jump off the page. Normal is normal. Different is different, and it sticks out. So I'd say wield this cautiously, because you will certainly rub people the wrong way. Like, oh, come on, dude. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I do know what you mean, but I also know what you said. And the point is that you choose what that is. And my fear and my concern, and what's frustrating for me, is when people use that kind of language internally or externally, and then they actually begin to believe it. That's the problem I have with it.
Powerful stuff, Nick. Powerful, powerful stuff. You've been so generous with your time. Where can our listeners find out more about what you do? Because you've got other things going on besides the book. Where can we lead people to find out more about how they can access your insight, your intel, and your information?
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Our website is teammachine.com. Machine is spelled MCHN. It's got links to all the socials and our services and products, and all the info. It's kind of the one-stop shop. So anybody that's interested, that would be the place to go, man.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, Nick, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your service. Really appreciate you, man.
Great conversation, Lawrence. I appreciate the opportunity, brother. Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.